Hey everybody. Today we're going to talk about whether or not we should quarantine sick fish when we discover one in one of our inhabited aquariums. I'm not talking about when we bring fish home from the store. Of course, we always want to quarantine then. We can have a discussion about that in another video. But I'm talking about when we find that we've got a fish that has come down with some sort of bacterial infection or a fungal infection, or it has fin rot or something like that. Is it a good idea to remove that fish from the tank and put it into a hospital tank or something? Now, the wisdom within the hobby, the powers that be, the dogma, whatever you want to say, the books, if you will tell you yes. Of course, the answer is always yes. You should always quarantine. Every time you have a sick fish, you should immediately quarantine, put it in a hospital tank, treat the hospital tank, treat the tank it came out of, etc., etc. We all know what the books say we should do. But I think about it like, well, think about how you drive on a day-to-day basis as you're going about your life, and then think about how you drive when you're taking your driving exam and you've got somebody sitting next to you that has a clipboard and a pencil. I'm going to guess that those are probably two very different ways of driving, but still close enough that either one is acceptable. So moving into the real world scenario, our day-to-day activities and our day-to-day lives, we can't always afford hospital tanks and medications and so on and so forth. So there are some real world aspects to take into consideration when we start talking about this. But I also think about it in terms of, from the fish's point of view, or from the sake of the fish, the health of the fish, if you will. Is it always a good idea to remove the fish and put it in a hospital tank? Because first of all, when I think of a hospital tank, I think of a tank that's basically fairly stark and bare. I guess you can keep the lights dimmed in it so it wouldn't be too bright and harsh on the fish. But it's not a comfortable environment for the fish to be in. It's a stark environment for a reason. You don't want lots of nooks and crannies for bacteria and dirt and stuff like that to collect. But I think that bacteria and dirt is overblown in the hobby. I don't think that's as much of a risk as people think it is. And keeping the fish in the tank that it's already in, let's talk about what are the downsides to keeping a fish in the tank it's already in when you discover it's got an injury. Let's ask ourselves, why would we remove it? What would be the benefit of removing it versus leaving it where it is? So I could see removing it if it had something that was highly contagious and you were afraid it was going to infect the other fish in the tank. Now there's a chance it already has, and so if you get it out of the tank, you're still going to have to treat the tank it was in. So I'm a little dubious as to whether or not that's even worth the time and effort to do it. I suppose it also depends on how easy it would be to catch the fish. How is the fish behaving? Is it something like an angelfish that you can basically just ask to come over and pick it up with your hand and take it out of the tank, versus something like a loach or a shark in a tank like this that would take me a week and a half to finally catch it? And both of us would lose years off of our life and stress over the whole course of the process of even trying to catch it. Is that helping the fish, stressing it out like that, going through that kind of effort to try to catch it? You're going to have to treat it with medications somewhere. You're probably going to have to treat the tank it came out of with medications anyway, since it was in that tank to begin with. A lot of the illnesses that our fish encounter are illnesses that are associated with tank conditions themselves anyway. A fungus infection, bacterial infection, something like ick. Now, ick has to be introduced, so ick would be something you'd bring home from the fish store, or you'd bring home from a friend's house. You got a fish from a friend that had ick or something like that. So ick does not just crop up in a dirty aquarium or when conditions are right. I know a lot of people still believe that. That's a myth in the aquarium hobby. There's no truth to that whatsoever. Ick only appears in your tank if it's been introduced within the last few days. It has to be introduced recently, a week or 10 days on the outsidest. If it's longer than that, it's not ick. So something like ick, if you see a fish that has ick on it, what would be the benefit of taking that fish out of the tank? You absolutely have to treat that whole tank now. If you take that fish out and you put it in another tank, you now have to treat two tanks. And so again, every time it comes to this idea of I've got a sick fish, pull it out of the tank and put it in a hospital tank, I always ask why? What benefit is that going to be to put it in this hospital tank? One of the benefits I could see would be the cost of medication. It's obviously a lot less expensive to medicate a 10-gallon tank than it is to, 125-gallon tank. But I'm probably going to have to treat the 125-gallon tank anyway, which is the point I keep going back to, is if I've got a fish that's in a tank that has an illness that's contagious, then I have to treat the whole tank anyway. It's been in there, it's infected the tank. I have to just assume that it's in there. I can't wait and see, because if you wait and see, by the time you're seeing it, you've got an outbreak again. So essentially, if it's something contagious like ick, it has to be treated immediately. If it's something like a fungal infection that's not contagious, but is a result of poor tank conditions, well, you still need to do your maintenance on the tank, and you still need to get the tank cleaned up. I guess maybe if the fish was easy to catch and you could just sort of remove it into a hospital tank and treat it while you were getting the tank back in shape or something like that, but presumably there's other fish in that tank too, and they're going to have to go through all of the, again, what is the benefit of taking that fish out of the tank and treating it somewhere else only to just put it back in the tank after it's been treated, especially if you need to treat the tank it's coming out of anyway. If you're not going to treat the tank it's coming out of, then it makes a lot more sense to me. If you're just going to pull the fish out and treat it over here, and then when you're done, bring it back and put it in the tank and never worry about this tank, all right, I guess I could understand that, but I don't think that way. If I see that my fish has some sort of illness, it's either a result of what's already in the tank conditions, a bacterial infection, a fungal infection. That means the tank needs to be addressed as much as the fish itself. And if it's something that's contagious, then the tank also has to be addressed. So anything that's going to come up where I've got a fish that needs attention or medication or something, I just don't see the point in going through the hassle and the stress and all of that of pulling it out of the tank and putting it somewhere else just to treat 2 tanks now. So if you've got some other wisdom or logic or reasoning behind that, and you're seeing some flaw in my thinking, then I would love to know what it is, and I'd certainly like to hear what your opinions are. How do you do it? Do you always, And again, if I can, I will. It's these real-world scenarios. Is it a fish that's easy to catch? Is it a small tank? Is it a big tank? Is it a heavily populated tank? And honestly, is it a tank with valuable fish in it? I know we can have a discussion all day long about what valuable is to different people, but that's also a real-world consideration. Did I pay $100 for the fish that are in this tank, or are they a bunch of guppy fry that were born in here, and if I lose them I can just replace them by having more guppy fry in the tank? That's a realistic consideration for a lot of people, and needs to be thought of when you're making these decisions about whether or not to remove the fish. And we make these kind of decisions all the time in life. There's a calculated risk as should I really get that fish out of there? What are the pros and cons? Is the benefit going to outweigh the cost, and so on and so forth? We have to think about these things and take pretty much every scenario as its own scenario and think, what do I do in this situation? Not there's this one prescribed method that always has to be done every time something comes up. It's what do I do in this scenario, in this situation? Again, I know what the books say, but this is everyday fish keeping, and I like to talk more about what we do in the real world and in our everyday lives. And so there's my 2 cents on that. So again, I'd be interested to hear your point of view. So leave your comments down below. Don't forget to subscribe. Make sure you ring that bell, because I do spur of the moment live streams, and you don't want to miss any of those. Of course, I always do a Friday and a Sunday night live stream, and you don't want to miss any of those either. So ring that bell and you won't. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I'll see you real soon in the next one.